Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mrutangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Friends, the subject for today's service is the rope with 3 strands. Swami Vivekananda spent 7 weeks in Thousand Island Park, upstate New York, in 1895. And there he trained a small group of dedicated disciples, at least 2 of whom he initiated into monastic life. And people who had heard him speak there, give classes to this small group of disciples, say that he spoke like one inspired. When he was giving a class on renunciation, detachment, giving up things that are not conducive to spiritual life, he was suddenly seized with a special mood, withdrew into his room, which was very close by, and wrote a poem, the Song of the Sannyasin. The Song of the Sannyasin speaks of the glory of renunciation, speaks of the ephemeral nature of life in the world, and speaks of the need to dwell in Brahman, the spiritual reality, the one spiritual reality, the one spiritual essence that forms the substratum of this world of names and forms. One of the verses in this Song of the Sannyasin is relevant to our discussion today. Where seekest thou that freedom, friend, this world, nor that can give? In books and temples vain thy search. Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. Then cease lament. Let go thy hold, Sannyasin bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. I'll repeat this. Where seekest thou that freedom, friend, this world, nor that can give? This world or in the afterlife, any other world, is not going to give you that freedom. That means freedom cannot be had from objects of the senses. Freedom has to be had from the spirit, which transcends the senses and the mind and the body. In books and temples vain thy search. By books is meant scriptures. We are devoted to scriptures. We study scriptures. But suppose we don't do anything by way of spiritual practice. We commit scriptures to memory, but suppose we don't translate these teachings into our lives. And books and temples too. Going to temples can be a spiritual exercise. It can just be a meaningless ritual, depending upon how I do it. Books and temples, these can be helps. Swami Vivekananda calls these things books, temples, doctrines, dogmas, rituals, which belong to all religions. He calls these secondary details of religion. These are all important. The efficacy of these secondary details is to be decided by how they further the primary aim of religion, which is the manifestation of our divine nature, the divinity that is potential in us, in the words of Swami Vivekananda. So books and temples are good, but study of books, study of scriptures, and going to temples, churches, mosques, gurudwaras, all these are implied. That should make us more and more spiritual. Swami Vivekananda says, religion is the idea. that transforms a brute into a man, and a man into a god. Animal nature, human nature, and divine nature. These three are intertwined in my personality. I have to transcend my animal nature, manifest more and more of my human nature, which means trying to live more and more of a moral life, manifesting the power of discrimination in me, having an ideal before me, and discriminating between whether this thought, this action is going to lead me toward the ideal or it will make me go astray. This trait of having an ideal and judging our thoughts and actions, whether they are in conformity with the ideal or they will deflect us from the ideal, this trait is the exclusive privilege of human beings. Animals don't have this. In fact, it is this trait which distinguishes human beings from animals. There are 4 traits common to human beings and animals. First is food. Second is sleep. Third is fear. And fourth is sexual urge. These 4 are common to human beings and animals. Then what distinguishes human beings from animals? It is this power of discrimination. Animals cannot have an ideal and strive for it. Animals live their lives in the impulsive plane. Their life is in the plane of instincts. And a human life also continues in this fashion. Impulsive, instinctual. There is nothing to distinguish such a human being from animals, because to have a spiritual ideal, to look upon God realization as the goal of life, and trying to think and act in conformity with that ideal, so that I am able to manifest more and more of my divine nature, this is possible only for human beings, not for anyone else. So Swami Vivekananda, back to the verse from his poem, The Song of the Sannyasin. In books and temples vain thy search. That means secondary details by themselves are not enough. They should help me manifest my hidden divinity. Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. Then cease lament. Let go they hold, Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. This is the refrain. Let go thy hold, Sannyasin bold. Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. This you find at the end of every stanza. So thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. That's the sentence which is relevant to our subject. The rope with 3 strands. What is the rope that Swami Vivekananda means? Thine only is the hand that holds this rope, and that rope drags you on. There is something at the end of the rope which drags you. You, the spirit, helplessly caught in the web of the mind, senses, and the body, are being dragged on by something at the other end of the rope. We'll examine what this rope is and what drags us. But we need to fundamentally remember that according to Vedanta, we are not man, woman, with this mind, that mind, alone. We are all that right to look upon ourselves as a man, as a woman. Right, it's a body-based distinction. But we are more than the body. We are the mind. And behind the mind, Vedanta teaches, is the spirit. And we are that spirit. It's not that we are the body, and inside the body is the mind, and inside the mind is the spirit, but because that would be a materialistic concept. Looking upon myself as the body, as some kind of a receptacle, and the mind is as some kind of matter which is inside this receptacle, and the Atman, the spirit, a very precious jewel encased in 2 jewel boxes. That's the most materialistic concept you can ever have. Vedanta doesn't approve that. Vedanta says you are the spirit. Whether I know it or not now doesn't nullify the truth that you are the spirit. You are divine. You are the spirit. But you have put on a clothing called the mind, over which you put on another clothing called the body. Of course, the sense organs are also implied. They are part of the body when you consider their gross aspect. They are part of the mind when you consider their subtle aspect with which we see dreams. So we are the spirit, we have put on these two clothing. But unfortunately, we look upon ourselves as these clothing. It will be as unwise to look upon ourselves as a coat or as a shirt or as a t-shirt. We are the spirit, we have put on this mind, we have put on this body. Vedanta says the more you remind yourselves that you are the spirit, the better for you. Because the default condition is, I am looking upon myself as the body, the mind. I have my preferences, I have my strong likes and dislikes. And since I look upon myself as the body, as the mind, I am an individual. And because of this attachment to my mind and body, I have a sense of smallness, a sense of limitedness. And I seek happiness, lasting happiness, pleasure unmixed with pain in the world. Objects of the world, both living and non-living, I seek happiness from them, lasting happiness. But time and again, over the years, it has been proved to me that happiness from objects in the world always alternates with sorrow. So the state of pleasure unmixed with pain keeps on receding from us. That pleasure will always be accompanied by pain. It takes long for people to understand. According to Vedanta, it can take lifetimes to understand this simple truth. Pleasure in the world always is followed by pain. Swami Vivekananda says in his very first lecture on Karma Yoga, titled Karma, Its Effect on Character, happiness comes to you wearing a crown of sorrow on its head. You invite happiness, sorrow comes in uninvited. You invite praise, we get puffed up. But for every person who praises us before us, there will be at least two behind us blaming us for something, criticizing us. Success is followed by failure. Heat is followed by cold. And so on. You have what is called dualities in life. Dualities characterize life. When wisdom dawns on us, wisdom born of the power of discrimination dawns on us, we understand that it is foolish and futile to seek the one to the exclusion of the other. My mind wants happiness. It loathes misery. But both of them come as a package deal. So when this power of discrimination dawns on me, I begin to understand that I have to seek lasting happiness. Happiness that does not alternate with sorrow. Only in something that transcends these dualities of life. And that is the Spirit, that is God, that is the divinity that we are, but we are not aware of it. So now, let go thy hold, Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. That means give up your hold on the rope. Swami Vivekananda says, because the misery that you experience is brought on yourself by yourselves because you are holding on to the rope and the rope is dragging you. So we need to let go of our hold. And this letting go of the hold is called giving up, is called detachment. And this detachment, giving up, is necessary for everyone, every sincere spiritual seeker who is hopeful of some fulfillment while living. Vedanta says you can be pure and perfect, you can be free while living now. Not after death. You don't need to wait for a post-mortem existence. Wait for your meeting with God, who will consign you to this exit or that exit, depending upon what you did here. Vedanta says you can be pure and perfect here. You are the maker of your own destiny. Of course, there is scope for God. We pray to God, God's grace is accepted, God bestows His grace on us when we worship Him with devotion. So giving up this hold is required for everyone, every sincere spiritual seeker. A monk, a nun, a person who is single, or a householder. As long as we are spiritual seekers, we seek the spirit and want to give up matter. And according to Vedanta, everything other than the spirit is matter. The body is matter. It comes from the elements, it goes back to the elements. The mind is also matter, says Vedanta. The mind is not the soul, which is what some traditions believe in. The mind is also matter, but this is refined matter, this is subtle matter which survives death of physical matter. But this subtle matter also dies when we realize that we are the spirit. So the mind is also matter. The mind is subject to variation, the mind is restless, the mind is calm, the mind is impure, the mind is pure. It's not a constant. It's subject to variation. So the mind is definitely not the soul. The spirit transcends the mind also. So I am the spirit, as we saw before, I am the spirit. And the mind is a vestment, outside of which is the body, which is a vestment. So I, as the spirit, I try to identify myself with my higher nature and try to give up anything that does not help me in the manifestation of my hidden divinity. So giving up the hold is required for everyone, every sincere spiritual seeker. Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda's teacher, he didn't know anything other than God. He lived all the waking hours of his life immersed in God. He taught people how to grow in God consciousness, how to grow in devotion. He said, if you're a sincere spiritual seeker, there is no substitute for renunciation. If you're a householder, if you're single, you're a monk, you're a nun, renunciation is a must. If you're a monk or a nun, you give up externally also. But if you're a householder or a single person in the world and are a sincere spiritual seeker, you still have to give up mentally. Mental renunciation is imperative for both the householder and the Sannyasin, the monk. So letting go or hold is important for everyone. When we say everyone, we mean spiritual seekers, seekers of matter, seekers of objects in the world, seekers of lasting happiness amid objects in the world, seekers who are disillusioned until they awaken to the truth that pleasure unmixed with pain is impossible in the world. We are not including them in our discussion. When we say everyone has to give up, that means every spiritual seeker needs to let go his hold. Now, what is this rope? And who lets it go? We need to examine briefly two principles of the Sankhya philosophy. The Sankhya philosophy is one of the 6 systems of Indian philosophy. The other 5 being Nyaya, Vaisheshika. The first 2, they're always bracketed together. And then you have Sankhya and Yoga. And then you have Purva Mimamsa and Vedanta. Purva Mimamsa, the followers are ritualists who believe in fire rituals, who don't believe in the knowledge portion of the Vedas. They don't believe in the teachings on our higher nature, the spirit. They say that's all eulogy. As long as you're alive, perform fire rituals. That's their teaching. And Vedanta is the culmination. By Vedanta is meant the Upanishads. So, Sankhya is one of the 6 systems of Indian philosophy. Most of Sankhya's teachings are accepted by Vedanta. Sankhya says there are 2 entities, Purusha and Prakruti. By Purusha is meant the spirit. Sankhya says there are as many Purushas as there are living beings. I am a soul, I am an individual soul, you are an individual soul, a third person is another individual soul, and so on and so forth. There are millions and billions of individual souls. Human, subhuman, microscopic, all included. Sankhya says there are as many souls as there are beings. And the second entity that Sankhya posits is Prakruti. Prakruti is nature. Nature with a capital N. Or let's say Prakriti means matter, both gross and subtle. Purusha is the spirit. Prakriti means everything that is not the spirit. That means our mind, senses, body, and this external world, everything is in the domain of Prakriti. Our true nature, the spirit, is Purusha. Now before we continue our discussion on Prakriti and Purusha, we'll just see briefly two main differences between Sankhya philosophy and Vedanta philosophy. Sankhya says there are as many Purushas, as many spirits as there are individuals, as there are living beings. Vedanta says the spirit is one. Infinity is one. You cannot have so many infinities. But the same manifests as different beings. The same spirit manifests through different minds, different bodies. And this manifestation differs in different people. In some people, the manifestation is more, in some, the manifestation is dull. But it is the same spirit. The spirit behind the body and the mind, that spirit is the same. And the same spirit is behind the objects of the world, inanimate, other living beings. So that is the first difference. Spirit, Purushas are not many, but one. That is the first difference between Sankhya and Vedanta. The second difference is Sankhya grants eternal status to two principles, Purusha and Prakriti. Vedanta says what exists is one. The spirit. The spirit appears to us as matter because of our ignorance. Matter is only an appearance on the spirit. There are no two entities, spirit and matter. All that is true, there are not two but 200 million billion entities as long as we are under the impression that we are the body, that we are the mind. But when we realize that we are the spirit, what exists is one. We all the time had believed matter to be different from spirit. But when we realize that we are the spirit, we understand that matter was just an appearance on the spirit. Vedanta gives a beautiful example to illustrate this truth. It says there is a rope lying on a ground. And in twilight you are seeing this rope. And you can easily mistake for insufficient light the rope to be a snake. And you experience all the fear associated with seeing a real snake. But you shine a flashlight on the object, then you know it is just a rope. The rope stands revealed for what it is. But as long as you saw the rope as the snake was real to you. But when you directed the flashlight on the object, you understood that the snake neither appeared nor did it disappear. All the time, what existed was the rope. Vedanta says similarly, what exists is that one spirit, with which you are one, and which is the substratum for everything in this world. That spirit appears to you as this world of names and forms, of multiplicity, because of darkness of ignorance. Ignorance of the fact that we are the spirit. Because we think we are individuals, because we think we are one with the body, one with the mind, this world is real to us. Because I am identified with the body, because I feel that I am a man, I see others as a man, a woman. When my understanding undergoes refinement, my perception of others also undergoes refinement. Change outside has to be preceded by change within. This is an important principle in Vedanta. People spend their whole lives in effecting change in others. Nothing happens. Unless I change myself, my perception of the world and my perception of others does not undergo a change. So I am the spirit, and the mind and body are just accretions on me. So Purusha and Prakriti, the second difference between Vedanta and Sankhya is that Purusha and Prakriti are not two independent realities, but the spirit alone is real and it is one. The infinite is one, and the infinite appears to us as finite things because of our ignorance. Now in Sankhya philosophy, Prakriti, nature, is said to have three constituents called gunas: sattva, rajas, and tamas. Now here is an important point. Prakriti does not contain sattva, rajas, and tamas, but sattva, rajas, and tamas are constituents of Prakriti. Just as three strands of a rope make the rope, minus the strands, there is no rope. And the word guna in Sanskrit, which refers to sattva, rajas, and tamas, is usually translated as quality, but guna means a strand of a rope that is Prakriti. So Prakriti, one strand is sattva, another is rajas, another is tamas. So three gunas means three strands of this rope called Prakriti. And when Swami Vivekananda says, "Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on," that means our own hand, that means ourselves as the spirit, we hold on to nature and nature takes us for a ride, leading us to misery for sure. So give up thy hold, Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. Give up your hold on nature, give up your hold on the body, give up your hold on the mind, give up your hold on the senses. Easier said than done. Nothing can be more difficult because this goal is possible only for human beings. Animals cannot have this goal. Just by studying this, hearing this repeatedly, we don't become different, but we need to work on ourselves. Swami Vivekananda says, repeatedly tell yourself that you are the spirit and think and act accordingly. What makes you weep, my friend? Asks Swami Vivekananda. What makes you weep, my friend? In you is all power. Manifest that power hidden in you, hidden in your divine nature. This whole world will be at your feet. Why? It's because only the spirit prevails, not matter. That's a powerful mantra from Swami Vivekananda. What makes you weep, my friend? In you is all power. That means all power is hidden within you, in the divine nature of yours. Call forth the sleeping soul and see how it awakes, says Swami Vivekananda. The soul is sleeping as long as we think that we are the body, we are the mind. The soul begins to awake when we look upon ourselves as an entity, different from the body, different from the mind. Swami Vivekananda says, call forth the sleeping soul and see how it awakes. Power will come, glory will come, goodness will come, purity will come, and everything that is excellent will come. When the sleeping soul is roused to self-conscious activity. These are powerful words of Swami Vivekananda. So Prakriti is composed of sattva, rajas, and tamas. And Prakriti drags us from our spiritual nature. Prakriti is compared in the Sankhya philosophy to a dancer who entices people with her dance. People are enamored of Prakriti's dance. So Prakriti keeps on dancing before Purushas. And Purusha gets attached to Prakriti. The spirit gets attached to matter because of enticement from objects of the world. But when Purusha begins to be awake, when Purusha begins practicing spiritual disciplines, practicing detachment, ultimately he realizes that he is the spirit. He is totally detached from matter, Prakriti. The dancer has no use for Purusha anymore, but her dance continues for the benefit of others. Because Because Vedanta says there is no wholesale salvation anytime. The world will continue to be a mixture of good and evil. The world will continue to be a mixture of people who are devoted to the world, who form 99.99% of humanity, and the rest, microscopic minority, will be seekers, and out of many such seekers, some will know the truth in reality. So that's the position of Vedanta. Prakruti continues its dance for the benefit of others. That means Maya's dances. Maya is the word used in Vedanta to denote Prakruti. So Prakruti dance, she keeps on enticing others until they come to their so-called senses. They practice discrimination, they realize their spiritual nature, and for them the dance ceases when they realize their true nature, when they are totally detached. So Swami Vivekananda says in this poem, let go thy hold, Sannyasin bold. Here again, if we look upon ourselves as a sincere spiritual seeker, everyone is a monk, a nun. Because we need to practice mental renunciation, as Sri Ramakrishna taught, if we are hopeful of any spiritual experience. So giving up the hold on Prakruti is what is meant, giving up the hold on mind and body. We are the spirit, we have caught hold of the rope, which is nature, and nature means mind, body and senses, beginning from them. And because of my hold on my mind and body, my mind, mainly my mind, and then the body, they drag me wherever they want. I am the spirit, supposed to be free, but I am helplessly taken for a ride by the mind and the senses, which are matter, but I energize these dead forms of matter. Because I am the spirit, I energize them, and they, without being energized by me, they are going to be dead matter. But because I energize them, they come to life and take me for a ride. That's the paradox. That's the unfortunate situation that people are in. So the solution is, I need to assert myself. Now we'll examine in detail these three strands of Prakruti. The 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita discusses three gunas. These three constituents of Prakruti receive detailed treatment in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. We remember these are three strands, and these form the building blocks of nature. And nature means not only physical matter, but also subtle matter. So it is from these Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, these three building blocks, that the mind has evolved, the senses have evolved. At the individual level, and at the cosmic level, the cosmic mind has evolved, Hiranyagarbha. The cosmic Ahankara, the cosmic ego sense has evolved. Subtle matter has evolved. And gross matter in this world have evolved. So Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, these are the building blocks. And at the individual level, at my level, I have Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. The spiritual part of me is free from nature, but the mind, senses and body, they are products of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. And these three inhere in me in different proportions, one predominating over the other two. When Tamas predominates over Sattva and Rajas, I am said to be tamasic. When Rajas does that over Sattva and Tamas, I am rajasic. When Sattva predominates over Rajas and Tamas, I am called Sattvic. Now we'll examine these one by one. Sattva stands for happiness. Sattva stands for purity, calmness in the midst of activity. Sattva stands for happiness. Rajas stands for pain. And Tamas stands for indifference. Indifference is different from detachment. This indifference is born of inertia, it's apathy. Not exerting oneself even to know that if something is attractive or otherwise. To be in a sleepy state with eyes open, that's what is meant by the tamasic state. It's not detachment. It's being a stock or a stone. It's just being inert. So sattva is the happiness principle, rajas is the pain principle, and tamas is indifference. Every object in the world is characterized by these three. Every object in the world has an inherent capacity to make someone happy. The same object can make someone else unhappy. And the same object can make someone indifferent to it. So sattva, rajas and tamas inhere in every object. For example, you take the case of a painting. A painter looks upon a painting. The painter who did the painting. His attitude toward the painting is one kind. And next, the observer. He can either feel happy or he can feel unhappy about the painting. And then third, the auctioneer. His whole thing is to find out what is the maximum value we can get for the painting. He has nothing to do with the painting itself. The painting does not induce in him a feeling of happiness or unhappiness, but he is totally indifferent to that because his focus is on getting the maximum money for the painting. Auctioneer. The painter is happy having painted that, and the observer can be happy or he can be unhappy seeing what is being portrayed in the painting. And third, the auctioneer. He is totally indifferent, not detached. There is a difference between both. That means whether the painting evokes a sense of happiness or sorrow, it doesn't concern the auctioneer because his focus is somewhere else. Similarly, you can take a baseball match. In the minds of those who root for the winning team, there is happiness. And the same thing induces a feeling of sorrow in the minds of those who root for the other team. And this whole thing induces indifference in the minds of those who are not interested in the game. So you have these three characteristics: happiness, sorrow, indifference in every object in the world. And these three are respectively sattva, rajas and tamas. And these are inseparable. They inhere in everything. They can be separated, of course, at the individual level. And that is what spiritual evolution is. But we'll go into depth. What is sattva, what is rajas, what is tamas, and what is meant by spiritual life, what is meant by growing in sattva, and what is meant by transcending sattva also. So we come back to this point. Everything in nature, physical or mental, is composed of the three gunas. And one predominates over the other two. And the summary of this discussion is, we need to remember that we are the spirit. It doesn't mean we become immediately detached from the body, detached from the mind, but we train ourselves to manifest more and more of our hidden perfection when we assert our spiritual nature rather than meekly subject to the default condition that we are the body, we are the mind, we are the senses, but we assert ourselves against them. We need a strong ego for this. That's an important subject again. The ego is the main obstacle to God realization. We read this. The logical question is how to get rid of the ego. Sri Ramakrishna says, don't worry about getting rid of the ego, because the ego cannot be gotten rid of. Until you realize that you are the spirit, until then the ego persists. You think you got rid of the ego, that very thought presupposes that you are egotistic still. So the ego cannot be eliminated. If we think of how to eliminate the ego, we are frittering away, in the words of Swami Vivekananda, our precious mental energies. Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda's master, speaks of two kinds of ego: unripe ego and ripe ego. Unripe ego is the ego that we are familiar with. The ego that is attached to the mind, attached to the body. The ego which makes us look upon ourselves as a limited individual. The ego that makes us look upon ourselves as the body. not as living in the body, but as one with the body, and as a consequence, look upon others as mine, look upon my possessions as mine. The sense of I and mine, the sense is a logical outcome of this unripe ego, because I am attached to the mind and the body. That's the default condition. Sri Ramakrishna says you can convert this unripe ego to ripe ego. Don't worry about elimination of this ego, but you can train this ego. You can transform this ego into ripe ego. And what is ripe ego? Ripe ego has its stand in the spirit. Unripe ego has its stand in the body, mind, and the senses. That's his dwelling place. But ripe ego dwells in the spirit. I am a child of God. I am the spirit. I am a spark of the divine fire, which is God. So this I automatically shifts its position from the body, mind, and the senses to the spirit. I am a child of God, God who dwells in me, not beyond the cloud somewhere, ready with a rod in hand to punish me in my afterlife. No. If that philosophy works for some, so be it. But Vedanta says God dwells in you at the core of your being. That's the idea to be cherished. So, God dwells in me and is very dear to me, very close to me. Sri Ramakrishna says the more you think of God, the more you think of yourselves as a child of God, as a part of God, as a spark of the fire within, the more the unripe ego gets transformed to ripe ego. So when I look upon myself as a child of God, I say, I am strong in the strength of God. So I continue to be egotistic, but the ego is based not on the body or the mind, but on the spirit. And this ego is a prerequisite for any kind of meaningful spiritual striving. If I am one with the body, one with the mind, when it is time for my spiritual practice, my body says, I had a very difficult day today, lot of fatigue, physical fatigue. The mind is there ready to second whatever the body says. The mind is also run down. So the casualty is my spiritual practice, not my food. I find some time or other, just a few seconds or a couple of minutes to pop in something in the midst of a busy day. But spiritual practice, that's at a discount. When I look upon myself as the body, as the mind, but when I look upon myself as the spirit, as a spark of the divine fire, I will try to assert myself over the body, over the mind, over the senses. I will be egotistic with respect to them and will do my spiritual practice, whether I get the blessings of my body, mind, and senses or not. So that's where the change is. I continue to be egotistic, but my ego has its root in the spirit now, not in matter. So we don't need to worry about ego elimination, but we need to worry about ego transformation. Corresponding to sattva, rajas, and tamas, or corresponding to the preponderance of sattva, rajas, and tamas over the other two qualities, we have three kinds of people: calm people, active people. Calm people does not mean they are not active. They are active and they are calm in the midst of their activity. Second, active people, but who are restless at the same time, passionate about their activity, desire-prompted activity, and they're always anxious about the outcome of the activity. They are rajasic people. And then we see people who are dull and inert, lazy. They won't exert themselves. Self-effort is out of the question from tamasic people. Tamas, the Gita says, tamas is defined by excessive addiction to sleep, more than what is required for our normal health. Tamas is also defined by laziness. It is defined by a tendency to postpone things. Tamas is characterized by delusion, a perverted understanding of things. Tamas is characterized by looking upon right as wrong and wrong as right. Sarvarthan viparitamscha buddhi sapartha tamasi. That is tamasic buddhi. That means it understands everything otherwise. If someone is foolish enough to give them some good counsel, that good counsel will fall into their ears as bad counsel. They will think, this man has some axe to grind. Why should you tell me all this? So that is that trait of tamas. So we have calm people, we have active people, passionate activity, and we also have dull people. Now sattva again. Sattva is a principle of poise, calmness, conducive to purity, knowledge, and joy. We have all this in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Sattva stands for purity. That means it is stainless, it is luminous, and it is healthful. But sattva also binds us, because sattva is also one of the strands that constitutes a rope called Prakruti. Sattva is not in the domain of spirit. Sattva also is in the domain of Prakruti. But we know tamas is the lowermost, rajas is at the middle level, and sattva is the superior, because sattva stands for purity, poise, happiness. Rajas for activity, passionate activity, and tamas for inactivity. So inactivity is to be shunned by all means, that's very clear. So sattva stands for, sattva is stainless, luminous, and healthful. But sattva also binds us by attachment to happiness and knowledge. Knowledge here is knowledge with a small k. Knowledge that is characterized by the distinction, the knower, the known, and the process of knowing. All kinds of empirical knowledge. So sattva binds us by attachment to happiness and knowledge. The sense of satisfaction, joy, and happiness we experience anytime is produced by sattva. When the light of knowledge shines through the gateways of the body, then it may be said that sattva has prevailed. That means when there is knowledge within, now we speak of more and more of knowledge of the spirit that shows through our mind, that shows through our body. Then sattva is predominant. Next is rajas. Rajas is the principle of motility or motion, leading to activity, desire, restlessness, or disquietude. Rajas is activity, principle of activity, any kind of motion is because of rajas. Restlessness, rajas. Anxiety, rajas. Confusion, rajas. Passion, rajas. Any kind of desire arising in the mind, rajas. Working with great attachment to work, rajas. Always being anxious about the outcome of work, rajas. We cannot imagine how much of mental energy, precious mental energy, is being wasted away by being rajasic, or by these negative components of rajas. Passion, restlessness, anxiety, attachment to work, attachment to the fruits of work. That is rajas. It binds us fast by attachment to action. Even if there is nothing to do, even if there is some time in my hand to do some reflection, to do some studies, or to sit and meditate, I won't be able to do it because I am so rajasic. I have to do something. I have to have some people to talk to. I have to do something. That doing something can be the most meaningless thing. And I mistake that activity for some kind of an accomplishment. And people are not, there is no want of such people too. Meaningless activity. Sri Ramakrishna speaks amusingly of a person who keeps on hammering broken earthen pots, hammering them to pieces all through the day, and feels exhausted at the end of the day. His hammering those pieces are not of any consequence whatsoever. He has been active throughout the day, absolutely useless activity for himself as well as for others. And he says he has been active and he feels completely exhausted by the end of the day. So there could be such rajasic people who just cannot sit quiet even for 5 minutes. They try to do 108 repetitions of the divine name. All through the time, something inside them pushing them all the time. And the moment 108 is over, they jump as if they were sitting on fire. After that, and then they resume once again their rajasic activity. So mere activity is not something to make a song about. I'm very active, right? How long? How long can your body permit you to be active? At one time, the body slows down. And if we don't slow down, when the body slows down, then there is some kind of a tug of war. And we are speaking of spiritual aspirants here. We're not speaking of generality of people. So if you're spiritual seekers, we need to cultivate other forms of spiritual practice, like study of scriptures. We do work all right. We try to do work as worship, and we try to be active all through. But we need to spend time with our meditation, with our repetition of the divine name, with prayer regularly, even as we are leading an active life. So when the body slows down, when there is no longer as much capacity in the body as there was when we were young, we have other means to spend our time to benefit ourselves spiritually. But if we have not learned to meditate, if you have not learned to study the scriptures, if you have been only active when the body refuses to be active at one point, then what do we do? So this is an important question a spiritual seeker addresses to himself. So mere activity is not something to glorify. So Rajas binds us fast to action. And Rajas is the principle of activity in everything. It always moves us. It makes other things move too. And it because of Rajas that the senses follow their objects. It is because of Rajas that the mind is always eager to come in contact with some sense organs, the eyes, the ears, the skin, the tongue, and the nose. Each one of which is eager to come in contact with its respective sense object. This kind of eagerness to come in contact and coming in contact presupposes motion, and motion presupposes Rajas. So it's because of Rajas that the mind follows the senses and the senses follow their objects. Next, Tamas. Tamas is the principle of inertia. If Rajas is the principle of motility, Tamas is the principle of inertia. Tamas is a Sanskrit word which means darkness. Tamas means night, darkness. And darkness here refers to the darkness of ignorance. Ignorance takes various forms. In a tamasic person, ignorance of the purpose of his own life. He doesn't take his own life seriously. He doesn't understand the precious and rare nature of a human life. He doesn't understand that it is only in human beings that the power of discrimination can be awake. He looks upon only sleep, laziness, and a tendency to procrastinate as way of life. And as long as there is someone to support him, such people get by. There is no want of such examples too. People who cannot get into any job, who cannot stick to any job, one word from a superior and they'll immediately give up that job. As long as there is someone or some inheritance from someone which is going to support them, they can afford to have their way like this. But when there is no inheritance coming forth and there is no support from parents, these people will wake up of themselves. It's only the doting of the parents, the blind attachment of the parents, that lets such tamasic children thrive. And when the parents vanish from the scene, and if there is no inheritance from the parents to the children, and when such tamasic children are on the streets, maybe it may be too late for them to manifest any kind of rajas and grow. There are people like this, people who cannot take their own life seriously. But as long as we saw, as long as there is someone to support them, they can get by. But that is not helping them in their evolution. So tamas means the darkness of ignorance. It binds us by inadvertence. Inadvertence, that is apathy, a sense of carelessness, indolence, and sleep. So darkness, indolence, inadvertence, delusion, all these arise when tamas prevails. When tamas predominates over sattva and rajas, this is what happens. Darkness, indolence, inadvertence, and delusion. Tamas veils our knowledge and binds us to apathy, inadvertence. Rajas binds us to action, sattva binds us to happiness. All this we have in the 14th chapter of the Gita. Sattva is characterized by white color. White stands for purity. White stands for stainlessness. White stands for calmness. Rajas is characterized usually by red. Red stands for passion. Red stands for desire. And tamas is characterized by black color. Black stands for darkness. Black stands for ignorance. I am reminded of the altar, the shrine in Bangalore Ashram. The Bangalore Ashram shrine has 3 levels of granite. The altar, I mean. The altar, the lower level of the granite is black, and there is a layer of red granite, over which you have a white lotus made of marble. Over that you have the picture of Sri Ramakrishna. The idea is Sri Ramakrishna, the truth, which transcends all the 3 gunas. The 3 gunas are characterized by the black granite, tamas, red granite, rajas, and white lotus, sattva. Sri Ramakrishna is transcending all the 3. So that's in the shrine. And this shrine was conceived and built by Swami Yuktatmananda, the author of Meditation and Spiritual Life. So that truth transcends the 3 gunas. So sattva is characterized by whiteness, rajas by red, and tamas by darkness. Tamas is the lowermost rung, rajas in the middle rung, and sattva is the ultimate, not the ultimate, the penultimate rung. Once we scale sattva also, we transcend the 3 gunas. That means we are one with the spirit. And all these 3, sattva, rajas, and tamas, Sri Ramakrishna says, all of them bind. But sattva helps us gain freedom. Sri Ramakrishna compares them to robbers, 3 robbers. A person was waylaid by 3 robbers. He was going through a wooded area, and there are 3 robbers who robbed him of his possessions and tied him to a tree. So one of them said, "Why keep him alive? Kill him." The second one said, "We have robbed him of all his possessions. Why should we take his life? Let's just bind him here to the tree and leave him to his fate." And then they went their way. But after a while, the 3rd robber came to where the person was tied to the tree. He took pity on this victim. He said, "I'm sorry for what happened to you." He untied the knots and made him free from the tree, and then accompanied him to the main road, the thoroughfare, and told him, "From here you take this road, and then you will gradually reach your place, reach home." So this man was immensely grateful to this 3rd robber who set him free and showed him the way to his home. So he said, "Why don't you come with me to my home?" He wanted to offer him hospitality. But the robber said, "I'm after all a robber. When I take to the street, the police will catch me." So Sri Ramakrishna says the robber who wanted to kill this victim is tamas. Tamas kills us. Tamas kills our higher self. If we succumb to tamas, if we are devoted to excessive sleep, laziness, and postponing things, that kills our higher self. We may be medically, clinically alive and active, but absolutely useless as far as our spiritual evolution is concerned. We live a vegetating existence. So tamas kills. The next robber who said, "We'll just tie him to the tree," he is rajas, which binds us. And the 3rd robber who came and unloosened these ties and set the robber free and set him on the road to his home. True freedom, that is sattva. Sattva sets us free. Sattva unloosens our bonds. Sattva helps us grow in detachment and shows us the way to freedom, to our true nature, the spirit. So, though all these three are robbers, sattva has to be cultivated more and more. Now, here is an important point. We have all the three gunas inherent in us, and seeing these description of all these three qualities, we can, if we see this and dispassionately analyze ourselves, we can know which guna predominates over the other two in our lives. So obviously, if we want to be true spiritual seekers, and if we are hopeful of some kind of a spiritual fulfillment, we need to give up tamas and cultivate more and more of sattva. The idea is to go to sattva. But we need to remember that from tamas to sattva is not a straight jump. We have to pass through rajas. Activity is inevitable. Self-effort is inevitable. A famous Sanskrit verse says, even the king of the forest, the lion, animals don't willingly come and fall into the mouth of a sleeping lion. Even the lion has to go about and hunt its prey. Without self-effort, nothing happens. So activity, rajas, is required. To get rid of tamas, we have to be active. But we know the negative traits of rajas: passion, desire, restlessness, anxiety, fear, worry. We need to stay clear while being active, not to have any of these qualities. That we do by doing karma yoga. You do action, but you do it as worship. You offer the work to God. You do work as worship. You offer the work to God. You offer the fruits of your work to God. You offer your sense of agency also to God. So the strong, unripe ego, I am the doer, gives place to this ripe ego, I am an instrument in the hands of God. Because God has endowed me with some strength, I am able to do this work, not out of my own ego, my own limited strength. But God has helped me do something good. And if something bad happens, I attribute it to my own deficiency. I don't attribute it to God. The natural tendency is, if something good happens to me, I deserved it. If something bad happens to me, why should God be cruel to me? Why should this happen to me? But a spiritual seeker thinks, if something good happens to me, it's because of God. If something bad happens to me, it's because of my karma. That will lead us gradually to right understanding. So the journey from tamas to sattva has to pass through rajas, which is activity. But as spiritual seekers, we try to stay clear of the negative aspects of rajas, which are desire, passion, restlessness, fear, worry, anxiety, and so on. So in karma yoga, we try not to do desire-prompted activity. We don't do anything unless there is a purpose behind. But Vedanta says, every desire-prompted activity will leave an impression in the mind, which proves to be a source of bondage. So in order not to gain more impressions in the mind, in order to escape from work-induced bondage, we need to offer everything we do to God. Sri Krishna gives this prescription in the Gita. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever gifts you make, whatever you offer in a sacrifice, whatever austerities you perform, do it as an offering unto me. And by such offering, Sri Krishna says in the very next verse, you will escape, you will become free from work-induced bondage. Mokshese karma bandhanaihi. Mokshese, you will become free, karma bandhanaihi, from work-related bondage. And he also says, you will also become free from both good and evil effects of work. Shubha shubha phalai revam mokshase karma bandhanaihi. You will become free from good and evil effects of work. You will also become free from work-induced bondage. Good and evil effects of work, which means good samskaras and bad samskaras. When I learn to do work as worship, I offer my desire to God, I do work to satisfy God, and since I offer the fruits of my worship also to God, my mind gradually grows quiet, grows in calmness as I do activity. That means Rajas gradually gives way to Sattva, which stands for calmness. If I am just Rajasic, I continue to be restless. I continue to be thinking about the end, whereas I should focus on the means to be adopted for a work. So that's what Karma Yoga, that's how Karma Yoga helps us in our spiritual evolution. Transforms our Rajasic nature gradually to Sattvic nature. When we offer work to God, when we offer the fruits of our work to God, the mind is less turbulent, the mind is more calm, and I am able to distance myself from the mind, and I am able to find my position, so to say, in a place, not outside, within me. I am able to distance myself from my body, mind, and senses and experience this calmness as being one with that calmness. So this important point we keep in mind. Our journey from tamas to sattva passes through rajas, but we take care that we stay clear of the negative aspects of rajas. Next, the role of devotion in letting go of the hold. Let go thy hold, Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. The way of devotion has its important place. The more we hold on to God, that means the more we try to dwell in the spirit, the more our hold on nature loosens itself. We are one with the mind, one with the body, one with the senses. And that's why this entire play called this world unfolds before us. But instead of grabbing hold of the rope called nature, I try to grab hold of God's feet, which is I try to dwell more and more in the spirit. God is that supreme fire, and I am a spark of that supreme fire. And I learn to repeat God's name, try to do it with alertness. I try to be prayerful, I try to be worshipful, I try to do work as worship. I try to do my spiritual exercises also, not as some kind of a mechanical chore, but I look forward to my spiritual practices. So the more I try to hold on to God, the more unloosened becomes my hold on nature. In Sri Ramakrishna's simple language, the more you go toward the east, the more the west recedes from you. You don't need to make any special efforts to move away from the western direction that is. You move toward the east, the west is left behind. So the more you think of God, the more the world recedes from you. And the world, the spiritual seeker reminds himself time and again, does not start outside, but the world begins from his own mind. Because in Vedanta, nature, world, has a special connotation. Nature does not mean what we perceive outside, all these waterfalls and other beautiful greenery and all that. But by nature is meant everything other than the spirit. So if my hold on nature, if my hold on the rope has to loosen itself, I need to hold on to something. And that is hold on to God's name, hold on to His divine form, be prayerful, and cultivate more and more of my ripe ego. Sri Krishna speaks of Maya, which is another name for Prakruti. Prakruti is the Sankhyan terminology, and Maya is the Vedantic terminology. Sri Krishna speaks of Maya in the Gita. Daivi Hyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. This divine Maya of mine, composed of the three gunas, is unfathomable. It is difficult to cross. Mame vaye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. Only those who take refuge in me can cross this Maya. That means when we take refuge in God, we can transcend nature. We can grow in detachment from our mind, senses, and the body. And in the Gita, in the 17th chapter and in the 18th chapter, Sri Krishna speaks of three kinds of so many qualities, three kinds of dana, gift, three kinds of austerity, three kinds of sacrifice, three kinds of happiness. And in the 18th chapter, you have three kinds of work, three kinds of worker, three kinds of knowledge, three kinds of buddhi, three kinds of fortitude, and so on. These three kinds mean sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. What is meant by sattvic work? What is meant by a sattvic worker, rajasic worker, tamasic worker? All this is given for us to study and reflect on ourselves. Because when we study this with an open mind, we have a very clear idea of the predominance of which quality over the other two in our own humble lives. These are all great kind of guidelines. These are not just for memorization, or this is not just theory. When Sri Krishna speaks of sattvic happiness, rajasic happiness, and tamasic happiness, for example, he says tamasic happiness begins in delusion, ends in delusion. It arises from excessive attachment to deep sleep, laziness, and postponing things. And it leaves the person in a state of delusion in the beginning and at the end. Rajasic happiness, he says, is born of the contact of the sense organs with their sense objects. It's like nectar in the beginning because of that momentary contact, but it's like poison at the end because it robs us of the power of discrimination and it saps the vigor of the senses. And sattvic happiness, Sri Krishna says, can be gained only by repeated practice. Sattvic happiness comes when the buddhi, the discriminating faculty, dwells in the Atman, Atma Buddhi Prasadajam. It's like poison at the beginning because of the spiritual discipline that we need to undergo. Because the difficulty in giving a habitually outward-going mind an inward turn, the difficulty in disciplining the senses, the difficulty in controlling the mind. So it's not a surprise that people who take to spiritual disciplines as some kind of a pastime give it up in no time and they're back to square one. I was much more happy when I was my usual self before I took to this meditation, japa, and all that. So these things take leave of themselves as long as my attachment to the world is intact. Because it's like swallowing poison. Sattvic happiness is like poison at the beginning. Mind training is like poison. It's like swallowing a bitter pill. But it's like nectar at the end because it leads us to immortality. It leads us to our immortal nature. It leads us to our true nature of the spirit. So now this description, we can reflect on this. What kind of happiness I am seeking? Tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic? So as we saw, there are so many qualities, three kinds of which Sri Krishna speaks of in the Gita. And these are for us to reflect on. So the points that we discussed today. Swami Vivekananda's poem, The Song of the Sannyasin, has this important line. Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. Then cease lament, let go thy hold, Sannyasin bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. So we need to give up our hold on the rope which drags us. Drags us to what? Drags us to misery, drags us to bondage. So we need to give up our hold. And the rope is nothing but nature. The rope which has sattva, rajas and tamas as its three strands. And we remind ourselves, sattva, rajas and tamas don't inhere in Prakruti, but they are Prakruti. Just as the three strands of a rope are not in the rope, but they define the rope. If you don't have the three strands, there is no rope. So sattva, rajas and tamas constitute Prakriti. They are not contained in Prakriti. There are three strands of Prakriti. And we saw that spiritual evolution involves a journey from tamas to rajas to sattva. So activity, self-effort is inevitable in spiritual evolution. But we try to be active, taking care to stay away from negative aspects of rajas like fear, restlessness, anxiety, attachment to fruits of work, and attachment to work itself. And we saw Devotion is a great help in our journey from tamas to rajas to sattva. The more we hold on to God, the more we are able to loosen our hold on nature. Thank you very much.